All right, let's get to it then. Here's this. So we all know that basically that Belarus. We all know what Belarus is. We all know where it's placed on the map. This little country that is east from Poland, west from Russia, north of Ukraine, Belarus, which is basically just a puppet state of Russia. Let's not mince words here. Let's be honest. Let's be blunt. Ruled by Lukashenko, Alexander Lukashenko, and new elections are coming out. Coming out. New elections are drawing near, but with a twist, with a very special Belarusian twist. So, and this is gonna be the beginning of a very sad and depressing story. Technically speaking, first of all, the election is supposed to happen in 6 months. The actual election in Belarus is supposed to be taking place in 6 months, but it's being pushed to January. That is news number one. And uh, the exact wording is that the Belarusian Central Election Committee on October 29th registered an initiative group supporting the candidacy of Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko for the presidency while rejecting applications to register groups for two other candidates, which means in practice that only Lukashenko could register as a candidate for president. So he has this window of time when only he can campaign and nobody else. All right? Nobody else besides him can campaign for presidency. So nobody that opposes him can register. That is great. But then several more candidates were allowed to register after a while to run against Lukashenko. There's only uh, there's only one problem with that. All of the other candidates that have registered, that were allowed to register, are all basically Lukashenko's people. They're all his subordinates or all his supporters. Let's name a few of them. All allies of Lukashenko and his regime. The other candidates for president. One of them, Alech Hajdukevich, leader of the pro-Lukashenko Liberal Democratic Party, said he is an active supporter of Lukashenko since 1994. Alexander Kizniak, leader of the pro-Lukashenko Republican Party, said Lukashenko is the right choice for president. I'm just reading out a list of people that are running against him in the presidential race. Another candidate is Olga Chomodanova, a former spokeswoman of the Interior Ministry, supported the suppression of protests and persecution of the opposition, saying that she supports the president in full. Yeah, basically, he first registered only himself as the presidential candidate, and then he allowed a bunch of other people to register, but they are all his supporters. What an amazing presidential race. I wonder who will win. I just cannot guess. It's anybody's guess who will win in Belarus. God, it's so unpredictable. What a wild ride this presidential election will be. in January 26th, I believe, or something. Belarus has not had free or fair elections since 1994, when Lukashenko came to power. The previous presidential election, which Lukashenko claimed to have won by a landslide with 80% of the vote, provoked nationwide protests and a subsequent regime crackdown on dissidents. The nationwide protests has been, of course, squashed by the regime. And there's, of course, because there's been a whole thing in the last election where there was a person who was a candidate. He got arrested, but then his wife stepped in to become a candidate in place of her husband. And then everybody thought she would win because people en masse went to vote for her. But Lukashenko said he won by receiving 80% of the votes. The countrywide protests happened and she had to flee the country. She fled to Lithuania. Yes. In late October, the Belarusian parliament approved January 26th as the date for the 7 Belarusian presidential elections, nearly half a year earlier than stipulated in the country's election legislation, and a month earlier than the previously rumored date of February 23rd. And there you go. The Belarusian Central Election Commission, led by Ihar Karpenka, justified bringing the election forward as necessary for kicking off the new 5-year socio-economic development cycle with a re-elected leader. Some experts, however, attribute the rush to hold the election to Lukashenko's desire to secure his domestic political position ahead of potential negotiations over Russia's war against Ukraine, because apparently Belarus would like to take part in those possible negotiations, an active part. And now we're going to be talking about the opposition leader, the person who was the candidate for president. Exiled opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya denounced the election as a sham, accusing Lukashenko's administration of running a fake electoral process. No kidding, no way, no way. Under an atmosphere of terror. In a joint statement with her shadow cabinet and the opposition's coordination council, Tsikhanouskaya urged her supporters to vote against all on the ballot in protest. So basically, vote against all the candidates. And while this won't help Lukashenko not being elected, it is sort of like the safest form of protest that the Belarusian citizens can afford to do right now, especially since it's been enshrined into law so quite some time ago that Belarusian soldiers can shoot citizens to kill if they deem that it's done in self-defense. Belarusian soldiers can basically shoot civilians to kill and not face any repercussions. Just keep that in mind when we discuss Belarus and its politics. And now, even though, because this part's interesting to me personally, even though the opposition is campaigning for Belarusians to vote against all candidates, a member of Tsikhanouskaya's shadow cabinet, Yuri Hubarevich, attempted to register as a presidential candidate and failed. Spoiler alert, he was not allowed to. We must confirm which practical steps that no one but people approved by the regime will be able to participate in these elections. Hubarevich told Zerkalo.io, explaining why he was attempting to register. The current election legislation is stacked against the exiled Belarusian opposition. Only people who have been resident in Belarus for the past 20 years can register as presidential candidates, and they can hold no foreign residencies or citizenships. Most of the opposition activists also have convictions in politically motivated criminal cases, ruling them out as possible candidates for president. So basically, only people handpicked by Lukashenko and his regime can run for president. How free, how fair. Oh yeah, of course. Russia has already backed Lukashenko's candidacy. We will definitely be following the developments of the election campaign very closely. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told Russia's state-run TASS. Dmitry Peskov, we know him very well from his various statements on war in Ukraine. Is a figure that is well known to us. We all know perfectly well what Peskov's all about. And of course, police have tightened the control over political prisoners, nothing new there. Um, oh yeah, of course, Belarus is um, with rejecting the notion that Russia has used Belarus at the start of the full-scale invasion to launch forces into Kiev from Belarus, which is a blatant lie. Lukashenko claims that they just happened to be there and they were about to go back to Russia, but they were forced to go to Kiev instead, which is, well, she didn't even win the first term, Svito, so she was not able to even win her first term. Even if we, Belarus, get involved in the war, this would be a path to escalation. Why? Because you, the Anglo-Saxons, would immediately say that another country had become involved on one side, so NATO troops would be deployed to Ukraine, Lukashenko said, which I'm sorry to say, I highly doubt that would happen. I highly doubt, even if Belarus would directly send troops, I doubt NATO would get directly involved. I am very skeptical on that claim. Russian propagandists commonly refer to the English-speaking countries, primarily the United States and the United Kingdom, as Anglo-Saxons. So yes, Belarus is basically trying to lie its way out of the start of the full-scale invasion by saying that it was not like Russian forces has launched partially its invasion from Belarusian territory, but it just happened to be stationing or training there or whatever, and they were going back, but they turned around to Kiev because they were forced to, quote unquote. And the truth is that there's been a months-long buildup of Russian forces along the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. Of course, Belarus was used as a springboard to facilitate the February 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That is just undeniable fact. But even in the face of those undeniable facts, Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko will still try to lie his way out of it, of course, naturally. So yes. And of course, he denies that any North Korean troops are in Ukraine, even though we basically know that 10,000 troops have been sent to Ukraine and about 8,000 of them are now in Russian Kursk. They're supposed to support the Russian forces in pushing Ukrainians out of Kursk. So that's a thing. And of course, there's the fact that there are some problems when it comes to this new relationship of Russia and North Korea, but that's not exactly the topic that we're discussing now.